All right. So today is the 23rd, or at least it is here in Los Angeles. And I thought it'd be fun because 2020, September 23rd, was version 1.0 firmware release. And I thought it might be interesting to show the prototypes, the beta version 1.0, and then where what we added over the last year, or I guess what I added, but who's keeping track? So right now I'm showing all the various prototypes before it finally got to the beta units that went out last year. The initial unit was using a Game Boy DMG enclosure or shell, which is those first three prototypes on the top. The purple one and the blue one center top are they were just supposed to do MIDI, and you could actually see the blue one has this giant honking thing hanging off of it at the top, and that's actually a what is that? The YM2149 sound chip, known as same sound chip as like the Atari STE, etc. That AY chip or whatever, running on Cat Skull Electronics Teensy, which is based off a project that I made open source, I think back in like 2015 or so. But yeah, it was I was just like, oh, it'd be cool to like control this YM chip project that I made with this tracker project that I started to work on, and that's kind of where everything started. The next blue one to the right of that is one that has that uses the Teensy's DAC, or the DAC module that PJRC sells that goes with the Teensy, and it had a Teensy 4 on it, and then I discovered how much it could do, like in terms of synthesis and everything else, and that kind of just made the project get out of hand very quickly. Initially, I was trying to make it really cheap and affordable, and at the time, the project didn't do nearly as much as what it does now. So as the project progressed and the features for user experience that I wanted were completed, the price just slowly went up and up. All four of those units in the middle, including the one that doesn't have a display, use a cheap display module that costs a couple dollars. But I found the problem with those is their view angle is designed to be portrait, where the long axis of the screen is vertical, and when you have it sideways like this, it tends to give you a different contrast per eye, and it ends up causing some headaches. So I realized I couldn't even use those screens. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable selling that, even if it was like super cheap kit style. And then the two bottom ones are as close to we got to the beta version that went out. And those ones use basically a $45 IPS display with capacitive touch, etc. It's quite expensive. And when I realized like the kinds of upgrades I was dealing with, and the amount of features that we were adding to the firmware, it became evident that I couldn't sell it like super cheap and go super cheap. Like, this is a project where I want to make what I want to make with the quality that I want, and try to keep the cost as low as I can, but still have the experience that I would want. You could always, I guess they say you could always start expensive and cut back, then you can start cheap and add to it. So, yeah. The two bottom units, I think we're running basically the version. So the firmware started with 0.9 was the first version that people got, and that I shipped off, I think, 90-something beta units that were sold in 2020, and they all came with version 0.9. The reason why it was 0.9 and not like 1.0 is because I knew that there was going to be stuff that I missed. Since I was the only person that used the firmware up until that point, I knew that there was going to be a plethora of changes coming in. So let people kind of tell me all the things that were wrong or all the features that they wanted or all the bugs that were there, and then compiled that list and just went through everything and addressed everything I could for version 1.0. Yeah. So let me switch back to the top view. There we go. So you can see here, the one on the left is one of the earlier beta prototypes. The one on the right is actually a beta unit, but it's using a 3D printed midsection, so it almost looks like the production unit. But this is kind of like this whole thing around it. It gave me an idea of what I wanted for the aluminum enclosure. This middle one is the production unit. So if I somehow this old prototype likes to turn off by itself, and I haven't figured out why yet. This is my first time turning on in quite a while. Let me try to zoom in. Can't really see the display, but I don't know. I don't even know what version of the firmware this is because it won't tell me. But you can see here's the project screen. Also, the button response is pretty hilariously wrong. It feels really clunky when you use it. There's no mixer screen either. The whole bottom area is just for groove. The effect sends are above the instrument page because there's no envelope screen. You can see like the wave synth doesn't have as many parameters as the newer version. Let's see, this is the macro synth. So all we got is wave synth, macro synth, sample, which is almost the same as what it is now, and the MIDI out, and that's it for this version. It works in theory, or maybe it doesn't. There we go. So what might be interesting here is if I play maybe a sine wave. Oh, maybe it's not that interesting. Actually, it doesn't sound that bad. I was expecting this to sound pretty aliased, because in a later version of the firmware, the DAC was upgraded. The bit depth was altered, which at quiet volumes, especially evident in sine waves, you'll hear some zipper noises on this one. Yeah. I think this is actually pretty almost the same as version 1.0 as far as its features, where I think 1.0 had the mixer screen, I'm pretty sure. Actually, I could look at that right now with this other unit if it turns on. Yay. Let me see if I could zoom in more. Or not. There we go. So this one, yeah, it has a mixer screen. Looks pretty similar actually to what we currently have, all things considered. But there's a lot of changes that I went over. Yeah. Project screen almost looks the same on this one. Key differences with the beta unit. The speakers are slightly different. The case is obviously totally different. It uses some different chips because of the chip shortage. Everything is mirrored on this, like if you compare to this, to this one. If I maybe zoom out a little bit. The inputs and outputs are mirrored. It's because I switched the display, and the display's ribbon cables had to be on the other side. So everything basically had to mirror and flip around because of the amount of space that was allotted. But other than those things, they're pretty similar. Hey, that one works too. So yeah, version 1.0 came out September 23rd. There was over 64 bugs and change requests that were done on that version alone. Then a month later, I added the remote display tech, so we could Yeah, if you're having garbled audio, I don't know why. We could blame Discord or my internet. I don't know which. But so the remote display, was what I use on the meetups and what a lot of people use with headless. So a month after 1.0, I added that remote display, and then a month after that, I added the headless version of M8 because once that remote display was there, you could basically run, the firmware on just a teensy itself and some software. Stereo sample support. I'm going through the change. The change log is like gigantic. Here, wait. Let me set up my screen. Oop. Change log. Put that over here. Huh. So this is what I'm looking at right here. So all of this stuff that's here has been done in the last year, which is pretty nuts, all things considered. I'm basically working on this project nonstop. All my friends know it, and some of them are annoyed by it. But yeah, it's been a lot, including doing all the hardware prototypes, doing all of the, customer service and shipping and everything. It's all handled currently by myself. Hopefully in the near future that won't be the case. Let's see here. So headless was introduced in November, and then on the 22nd of November, I added stereo sample support and color themes. A month after that, song rendering and sample editing and recording. Sample editing and recording and song rendering were all, in December of last year. And then the following month, I added the FM synth. Let's see, 421. Woo. I'm just listing some of the features that were actually important. 2.0 came out, what is that, May of this year, which added the second LFO, the DJ filter, and 45 other fixes and changes, which is pretty. You see, this is for the 2.0 right here. It was going to be called 1.4, but since it's the first firmware that only works with the production unit, I decided to make a substantial version bump just because no other firmware version works with the production unit. And it's also important to remember that all of these firmwares from here on out work with headless, and headless has its own firmware that you have to download, but it's updated alongside. The beta and the production firmware are both identical. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all of the feature history of M8, which is pretty dang substantial. Hopefully my audio is still working. When was FM synth added? I don't know. Look at the change log. FM synth was added January 11th on version 1.3. But yeah, I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot more features probably down the road. But obviously these last point release versions that I've been working on have all been related to fixes. I basically want to have a very rock solid platform to work from before adding anything new. As well, I'm still fulfilling pre-orders. We're about halfway done fulfilling those. So I don't really have that much time to work on firmware or gather ideas for features. It also gives me somewhat of a, anxiety thinking about firmware while I'm trying to build units to ship them out. So, but some of the future features I've been looking at that are on my list is I know the very next version of the firmware is going to have better crash handling support. Basically what happens is when the M8 crashes, because I have a bug somewhere, you'll hear like a noise, and what that is the DAC being stuck on the very last fragment that it was told to play, and then the unit reboots. When it reboots, you lose any changes that were made since the last time you powered up. The next version I'm adding will be when it crashes, it'll boot back up right where you left off, right where it crashed, so you won't lose any changes. I got code working on that today, and it works, so that'll probably be coming up in 2.08, I think, release? 2.8? Yeah, no, 2.08. Yeah, there we go. Other things I've been thinking about is I want to have some time displays. Like, it'd be sweet to have the elapsed time in the song since it's been playing, as well as what time it would be in the song where the cursor position is. I think it'd be tremendously helpful. As well, maybe a cheeky thing like how much time you worked on this song. That might be useful, especially if we displayed that content on the file browser when you're looking at songs. That'd be super useful to have. So you'd be like, oh, what version of the song was it? Oh, it's probably the one that I spent like 5 hours working on. I want to have a couple new instrument types. None of them are synthesis related. They're all kind of helpful instruments. I want to have one that's an external instrument that's basically a merge of MIDI out and audio in at the same time, so that way you could maybe throw the input through like the filter and the amp and stuff like that that you have access to on the other synth engines, only it's just processing the left channel, right channel, or stereo input of the device. I think that'd be cool, but I don't know the practical. I don't know if I could actually do that or not, but that's something I want to have if I can do it. Another one I've been thinking about is maybe adding an effects instrument that allows you to configure all of the reverb, the chorus, and delay settings as an instrument, so that way you could fast change all of those, kind of like presets of all of those settings. I thought that might be super useful. Another feature that's on my list is quick selection rendering. So you could select a region and, I don't know, some magical shortcut. I haven't figured out what the shortcut would be, but it would be, you do some kind of shortcut that enables it to just quickly render out whatever is selected. So you could then insert that sample as an instrument. I think it'd be tremendously useful. You could do that now. You just have to mess with the render screen. And those that use Renoise know what I'm talking about, because you could do that in Renoise. Another thing I want to look into down the road is file transfers. I don't think M8 will ever be able to mount as a drive on your computer, but at the very least, it'd be nice to have a transfer tool that basically uses a protocol that's similar to like how the remote display works, that just allows you to browse and transfer back and forth files between the M8 and the PC without having to remove the SD card. I don't know how practical or speedy that transfer will be, but it's worth a shot, at least investigating it, in absence of it being able to mount as a drive. And finally, the main thing on my list is doing scales, having scale support and microtonal support. Those are kind of I don't know exactly the implementation of scales and microtonal. It all depends on how much RAM memory I have available, or that I want to have available to do those things. And I want to be able to implement it so it's really fun to use and not something that's tedious. But yeah, I'll know more about that implementation when I finally start working on features. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, and I will answer them. Mikey says key press count. That'd be hilarious. Actually, key press count might not be a bad statistic to have for, but I guess that's kind of similar to how long you've sat in a song. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that you want to elaborate on, or if that was a joke, but you're more free to to answer that.
You could have a compose based on a key count limit, and if you bust it, you're like disqualified.
Oh. Huh. I only like challenges that challenge yourself. Upload to SoundCloud? Maybe that should... No, I'm kidding. Yeah, someone mentioned, John Bro mentioned that someone wrote a USB thing mounting Teensy as a drive. It's not as simple as that. It's like a special type of format thing, and you need to use a program in order to browse and all that stuff. It's not mounted like a normal drive. To me, it just seemed kind of hacky, especially if you want something that works across multiple OSs. But if you know more than I do, reach out to me and we could look it up. Yeah, it was a MTP thing. Which to me just sounded, it sounded... what I'm thinking is if you can't have it mount as a USB drive, the next best option is something similar to how Electron does it with the Electron transfer tool. But I don't know. I haven't dug into it too much. It's just on my list of things that I would like to see at some point that I know that will help people. So. If you made an effects instrument, would you want to make a dedicated track for automating those so you want to take voices from 1 to 8? No, I wouldn't. Because I can't. So yeah, you would be eating up one of your tracks to cue that message, which I still don't think is that bad of a thing, all things considered. But I can't add a whole nother track because we're dealing with limitations. Without severe rewrites and consequences. 8 voice mode to turn the M8 into a standard polysynth. Yeah, I think I might even have it on my list. I just haven't put it on there, but like either MPE / round robin support. I don't have anything that actually supports MPE, I think, but maybe. I think there's some other features that would be ahead of that. Like I'd first rather see scale support before, doing round robin polyphony. But yeah, I'm not going to answer any more questions about features because that just kind of stresses me out right now. Are you getting some units into the hands of synth maker YouTubers for reviews, visibility? I think there's like 1 or 2 people that have one. I don't really want to push. I would hate to have like a big YouTuber kind of push something out there at the moment, just because everything is sold out and I can't even keep up with the current demand. It's nice that people are excited though, so I'm not gonna, and it'd be sweet if, somebody big like said how great it was. That'd be cool. But part of me also worries that like, oh, what if I launched another set of pre-orders and then I had to do twice as much work that I'm currently, struggling to keep up with. So I like kind of how it's progressed so far, because it feels at a pace that I could, at least for the moment, keep up with, and worry about hiring people and such like that, coming up in the next couple months. So this project has been a full example of working in baby steps, and working on it constantly. But like if I started off wanting a thing that does sampling and synthesis and FM and I would have never started it. But I started as like, I want a MIDI sequencer, and it just sequences notes like LSDJ. Like starting off with that kind of level of expectations is a lot easier to work on. So, any plans on merch? Yeah, there are definitely plans for merch. I want to be able to have T-shirts and such like that. Maybe some other cool items. It's definitely something that will help me as a business grow. Is getting, having items that are kind of easier to fulfill than the flagship piece of hardware. I have some designs that I showed off on Patreon at some point, I think. I'm waiting to have some free time to kind of revamp the store, so that way the store's theming kind of matches the current website. And then I have to figure out what vendor I want to use for all that stuff. So I need like a couple weeks to do all that and set that up, and I haven't had that time yet. What aspects of M8's development has been the most fun or challenging? Making hardware is challenging, but more importantly, it's more the hardware than anything else. Because software, is software, but hardware is physical and you can't change it once it's released. But it's been extremely stressful and difficult to, manage the hardware. And I'm sure I picked, as I was saying to somebody yesterday, I picked like the best time to try to make a new company that's selling physical hardware during a pandemic and chip shortage. That has been a little stressful. Have I considered selling customer assemblable kits? I have thought about it, but the problem is the only advantage I see in selling a kit is people's expectations for lowering the price, because it, saves so much time from the production standpoint. But from my point of view, it doesn't change the expense of the parts. And so basically it would alleviate some of the work, but none of the expenses. And the reason why M8 is the cost that it currently is because, well, I calculated wrong. And two, it's not so much the parts, it's the business, it's making sure everything's covered so everybody gets what they were looking for. The other problem with doing assemblable kits is there's not much that can be assembled by hand. Almost everything is surface mount. The only things you would be able to do is put the keys on, I think, and screw the unit together, which is not very exciting. Attach the battery as well, yeah. But yeah, I think my major problem with kits is it doesn't help me very much. I like if it was me, I would like to get a kit personally, because I'm that type of person. But I don't know. At this point, I haven't really fully fleshed out those thoughts. Unless it like saved me, or saved you, like the person that would be buying it. If it saved you like $100 or $200, it'd be totally worth it. But at the end of the day, it's not saving me anything significant, because it's still an expensive display and battery and teensy and running the business and everything else. I'm also going to state that the price is going to be increasing for orders that are not pre-orders, just because I underestimated the amount of costs that I'd be incurring on this project. And it's not for more money from me. It's because I actually need help, because I'm doing everything myself and I can't afford an employee to help me. And it would be super nice to have somebody, to actually pay somebody worth their time. especially shipping, fulfillment, putting the orders together, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and I'm totally sorry about import duties. That sucks. I think in a future world, I would be able to do distribution, so you would be able to not incur those fees. However, of course, if you're in Europe, you're still going to get VAT. It's just going to be VAT minus a little bit. Ugh. Yeah, because I think it's like it could be like 25% VAT and then like a 3% charge on top of that for import. Whatever your country is, you have different import fees. But I imagine with VAT, comparatively, it's maybe not that much different. But yeah, if I produce enough units to do distribution, I will. Yeah, I think somebody mentioned about transparency through all this process. I think how I've been taking this project is I'm giving information how I would like to get information as a musician or somebody that's interested in a product. Like, I don't know why people are so closed mouth, other than the fact that I think a normal company, you have different levels of employees that know different bits of information versus myself. I'm doing everything, so I have all the information at hand. So it's a lot easier for me to be transparent, probably. But yeah, if people don't notice or don't know, because I haven't really super announced it yet, but if you go to the website, the support manual is here now and the firmware version, as well as the recommended SD card list. If you wanted to upgrade the SD card, I would look at that list before you do so. Yeah, and if you connect your M8, you could literally just click on this link and you could actually connect to the remote display using Chrome browser. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums up this. Oh, somebody else asked if I have been thinking about making a slightly bigger tabletop version. I would rather make products that go along with this than making a bigger version. Like, if I want more buttons, why not make a button controller that could be used for other things as well? I don't think bigger is necessarily better. I think that, accompanying products that complement would be probably better, at least from my perspective. And there's been some thought about that stuff, but I just haven't had time yet to really explore those ideas. So hopefully toward the end of this year, I'll be able to have some time. The main thing you might want is like a keyboard so you could play in notes, but then like there's keyboard controllers that are amazing, So anything that I would do in a bigger tabletop version wouldn't be as good as like getting something that just does that. The other thing too is with M8, if you use if you hook it up to your laptop through USB, then you have a full-size keyboard that has, like, the computer keyboard can act as MIDI notes or note input into the sequencer. And on top of that, it has a bigger display. So it has, like, using a laptop in conjunction with the M8 is almost like that bigger tabletop version. But yeah, I think unless we have any more questions, we should call it. I would like to thank everybody who has contributed in both ideas and bug reports and general support. I really appreciate it. this software is where we're at now wouldn't be there without your input. And it should be evident by looking at the version 1 changelog. I'm just trying to steer the ship to make us all happy. So, yeah. Hopefully we'll have some cool stuff coming year on this firmware. All things considered, yeah. And if you want to look at the firmware changelog yourself, you can. It's on it's linked off of the Dirty Web website. But yeah, it's pretty crazy that it's only been a year since version 1, and we've gotten this far. All right, everybody have a good weekend. I'm going to take the weekend off, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. But yeah, see you all later, and thanks for joining.